Daredevil is such an important, I know I'm not the only one who's told you this, but Daredevil was literally such an important show for me, especially Karen. When I've always resonated with Karen, especially in season 3. Season 3, I was like, no. I was really like, no, Karen, that's me. I'm like I saw so much of myself in Karen with that season, and it's really, you've just done such a phenomenal job for that. But of course, please correct me with this timeline. But True Blood ended in 2014, right?
Yes.
So did you go straight from True Blood to Daredevil?
I was on the set of Daredevil within 48 hours of wrapping True Blood. Yeah.
Wow.
I wrapped True Blood at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. I went home and I packed. I was on a plane that night to go to New York, and then the next morning I was in the chair getting my hair dyed blonde and getting in my costume, and I think I filmed the day after that. It was so fast. It was one of those things where I almost didn't get to do the job because we overlapped by about 2 weeks, and it was mostly insurance days that they were bothered by on True Blood. They wanted to keep the insurance days in case they had a problem and needed to keep me there. And for a while, they were almost like, well, we can't do it. You can't. But I wasn't going to get the job. I would not have been on Daredevil as Karen Page if they hadn't figured it out. But Netflix Marvel, to their credit, they worked around, they block shot those first 2 episodes, which means that instead of doing 1 episode and then the second one, they shot 1 and 2 simultaneously, which meant that we could shoot a lot more stuff without me during those first 2 weeks. So I came in after they'd started and had like a really intense 2 weeks to catch up with everybody. But that was, something that they worked out so that I could actually be there and do the show.
Well, with that quickness being in mind, Karen has so many deep emotional scenes. I mean, the first time we're introduced to her, she's like covered in her partner's blood.
My first scene on set was the one where the guy like chokes me out in the jail cell. It was so intense, like right off the bat. I think even like our producer at the time was like, I can't watch this. He left the room. And then like the next scene I had was the interrogation scene with Charlie and Eldon, and I was like, and I'm all teary and like in jail, and it was really intense, yeah.
So what does prep for Karen Page look like? Not just like in terms of like, comic research, but like emotional preparation as well.
So I did look at some comic books for sure. I once it was settled that I had the job and we were going to work it out, I did start doing that research. I did know that obviously I knew she died in the comic books. I'm sorry for none of you. Don't worry, Kevin Smith has heard from me. He was on Relics and Rarities, and I kept threatening to kill him. It was really fun. Dungeon Masters of a lot of power. So she had died in the comic books, and also I think her character, for female characters at the time, represented something that I think I wanted to move on from. And so, also an interesting thing with comic books, like you were talking about before, is that it's a known property, and people have a lot of love for it, and you want to honor and respect the love, but you also want to tell a new story, and you want to switch things up enough so that we're taking new ideas and new concepts out of this. So I was very excited about okay, who is Karen Page in 2014 in this particular predicament? And again, if you haven't seen the show, I'm going to spoil a little bit here. But when they were interested in me and we were figuring out whether I was going to be the one, I spoke to one of the producers and I said, hey, can you just give me a little rundown of this season? Because I was just a little nervous about coming on and playing the superhero's girlfriend. And what was that really going to entitle? Was I going to have a storyline of my own that would feel fulfilling? And he told me that I was going to kill Wesley, the Kingpin's right-hand man, at the end of the season. And I was like, great, I'm in. Because that's an action that she takes, right? I don't mind being kidnapped by the villain if it's because of something I did. I just don't want it to be because of something he did, And so that was an important thing to me, that is she going to have agency? Is she going to be making her own choices and getting into trouble for her own reasons? Then it's great. Then it's just good storytelling. So that's really what sold me on it. And then I met Toby and I was like, oh man, did you have to be so nice? Because now we're all really sad you're gone and everyone's really mad at me about it. But yeah, Toby's cool.
there's so much that Karen has gone through and has really developed into the Karen Page we all know and love today. I think it was such a great decision. I know people have their back and forths about and their issues with season 2, but I really dug what Punisher brought to the world of Karen and what side that showed of her, especially getting to expand in, and of course the Punisher show as well. What is it like being able to show these multiple sides of such a complex character, not just with Karen, but like all the other characters you got to play over the years?
Yeah, I mean, we want to see these characters in as many different situations and with as many different people as we can, because that is when it starts to bring out these different aspects of themselves. And I think Karen particularly is someone who's hiding. Karen is someone who has a lot going on inside, and she says very little of what those thoughts are and what those experiences are. And so being able to do scenes with Frank Castle, who everyone was calling a monster, and I think I look at him and go, well, if he's a monster, then some of what I've done is pretty monstrous. And therefore it puts a different perspective on how she looks at him. And I think I really enjoy having his presence is really interesting, because I think on the scale, the kind of like gray scale of like vigilantism, I guess, I think Karen falls kind of somewhere in between Matt and Frank, and then a little bit more of like, this is a case-by-case basis, right? I don't know if we can live by these black and white rules across the board. And so it's good to see her kind of get pulled in one direction and then push back the other way, and then have an experience that shoves her all the way over here and then come back. And, you know, I get, like, I think a lot about Frank's story and loss and how much she relates to that. And so in a way that Matt doesn't really talk about. He isn't a vengeful superhero. You know, he's not doing it because of his loss on a certain level, whereas Frank certainly is. And I think Karen's a little more akin to that.
I definitely agree, and we get to see a lot of that. You said season 3 is your favorite season. I want to nerd out with you a little bit about just how phenomenal that season is. I mean, genuinely, in my opinion, that's one of the best seasons of television.
Thank you. Yeah, we had new showrunner Eric Olson came in. I loved our previous showrunners as well, but Eric Olson to me is my favorite showrunner I worked with.
I want to talk about the Karen episode and how you literally made me cry that entire episode. That episode is probably it's very hard to watch for me personally. I'm like, yo, Karen is going through it, especially when she's like in the car and she's like calling her dad, and he's like, hey, yeah, you're not gonna be like, you got to stay over there. Like, I don't want you here at all. Like, there's so much there, and it's so deep and complex. What was the most shocking aspect of season 3?
I mean, you know, we'd always had this question of like, what is the deep, dark secret for Karen? And each showrunner had their own version of what that was. And it was all kind of in the same area, but every single showrunner, I talked to them about, like, where are you? And then shared with them what I thought it was. Because obviously there's a big difference between, like, I killed somebody or, like, I used to be a stripper. You know, like, you want to know, like, where on this spectrum are you? Because that's going to shift how you feel about it. And so each one had a slightly different thing, and then when it came to Eric, and he said, I actually want to do it. And I said, wow, okay, so we actually really got to start nailing down what some of these were. And my only thing to him is I said, it can't be something like she killed a guy to save a school bus of kids, right? Because you wouldn't hold on to that as regret in the same way as actually something that you shouldn't have done, that was really your fault. And there were even moments, you know, he really made good on that, and that him and then Tamara, I can't remember her last name, who wrote it, Wilkinson, I think. You know, they were so excellent about not only like hearing that concern and writing something really beautiful, but then when I read it and I was like, this is great, can we even go a little further here, right? Like at one point, I think the boyfriend was chasing me in the car when we had the accident, and I said, I think it's better if he's not. I think if she's just, it's her fault, right? She was just driving too fast, she was too high, and she let her emotions get in the way and she crashed the car, right? Like then it's solely squarely on my shoulders. There's no one else to push it off to, and I really want to push in that direction. And they said yes. And so, the fact that he was willing to be that open and flexible and let me have that much to say. And then, God bless him, I love him so much. He took the entire crew to upstate, New York for a week to shoot a family drama in the middle of his superhero show. And for me, a relatively less important character on the show than, his Kingpin and his Daredevil, and I don't know, I felt so honored and grateful that he was willing to do that he thought the character and that I warranted that kind of time. I don't know, it's really like, to this day, I'm the most touched by the fact that we got the opportunity to do that. Really am, yeah. It doesn't happen a lot, so.
And I'm glad that you have gotten that experience. I want to talk about Daredevil Born Again, of course, and if you guys have any fans out there have any questions, start getting them ready.
I can't tell you anything, but please ask.
What was it, obviously we saw Charlie and No Way Home, and Born Again has been through so much, a lot of changes, a lot of stuff. Yeah. What was it like to finally get the call that, hey, like, Karen is back and you'll be taking over?
Well, I was a little sad when she wasn't, more than a little sad, and I didn't really know why. I didn't, I was like, oh no, I must have done a terrible job, as if nobody wants to see anymore. It gets to you on that personal level, but you do start to learn that, like, these are big businesses and nothing is personal. Like, they don't have enough time to be personal about anything. So it's just a decision that gets made, and it doesn't, like, the worst they're guilty of is a little thoughtlessness, right? So it really isn't. And but once they kind of realized that part of what made the show strong was this history, that everything we had built and brought into it was meaningful and important for the show. And then they called and said they wanted us back, and I was a little nervous because I was like, I don't really want to come back in like a lip service kind of way where we're just paying lip service to the old show and it's a cameo without really acknowledging what we built, right? I mean, on some small level, I helped build that show, and I wanted it to be meaningful. So again, it was like conversations with Dario and what is the plan and all of that, and he was able to, really impart to me that he knows that Karen is an integral part of this story and he wants to do justice. And yes, we had some stuff to work out with what they've already shot and things, but that season 2 would be coming, and it is coming, and we're